The rain was hammering against the large bay window of my apartment, a frantic, percussive rhythm that matched the anxiety in my chest. I watched my twin sister, Lyra, pace back and forth on my antique Persian rug, her movements like those of a caged, beautiful animal. She had shown up on my doorstep an hour ago, a ghost from a life I had tried to leave behind. Her designer coat soaked, her perfect makeup smudged by tears, her usual vibrant energy replaced by a raw, jagged desperation. To be identical in face and form yet so utterly opposite in spirit is a strange trick of nature. I was Alara, the quiet one, the planner, the artist who had built a small, respected art gallery from the ground up. She was Lyra, the brilliant flame, the charmer, the gambler who burned through life with a reckless, beautiful, and terrifying intensity. I don't know what to do, Elle, she was saying, her voice cracking. I messed up, really bad this time. I borrowed money from the wrong people. They're not the kind of people who send strongly worded letters. They're looking for me. She looked at me, her eyes my eyes wide with a fear that I knew was real. No matter how many times she had disappointed me, how many messes I had cleaned up, that look of genuine terror in her eyes could still break down all my defenses. I just need a few days, she pleaded, a place to hide, to think, to figure out a plan. Please, Elle, you're the only one I can trust. Against my better judgment, I relented. I always did. She was my sister, my other half, the mirror image of my own soul, albeit a fractured and chaotic one. Okay, I said softly. Of course, you can stay. Let me make you some tea. It will calm your nerves. As I turned to the kitchen, I felt a familiar mix of love and weary resignation. This was the dance we had been doing our whole lives. Lyra would set the world on fire, and I would arrive with a bucket of water. I busied myself with the kettle, selecting a calming chamomile blend, my back to her. I heard her rummaging in her expensive handbag, the sound of glass clinking. I assumed she was looking for a tissue. She came into the kitchen as I was pouring the steaming water into 2 mugs. Here, she said, her voice suddenly much calmer. Let me help. She took the mugs from my hands, her smile almost back to its usual dazzling wattage. You're a lifesaver, Elle. I mean it. We sat on my plush velvet sofa, the storm raging outside, a temporary peace settling between us. We talked for a while, about old times, about anything other than the danger she was in. She was so convincing, so charming, I almost forgot to be worried. The tea was warm and soothing, though I thought I detected a faint, bitter aftertaste. I dismissed it as part of the herbal blend. My eyelids began to feel heavy. A pleasant, sleepy warmth spread through my limbs. I'm so tired all of a sudden, I murmured, my head feeling like a lead weight. Lyra's smile widened. It's been a stressful day, she said, her voice a soft, hypnotic hum. You should rest. The world began to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring into a soft, indistinct haze. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was my sister's face, leaning close to mine. The desperation was gone. In its place was an expression of cold, calculating, and absolute triumph. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and the rustle of starched sheets. My head was throbbing, my mouth as dry as cotton. I wasn't on my sofa. I was in a bed, in a room painted a sterile, calming shade of white. Sunlight streamed through a window that had no handle and was made of thick, reinforced glass. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A woman in crisp blue scrubs came in, a kind, professional smile on her face. "Ah, you're awake," she said cheerfully. "Good. Dr. Evans will be in to see you shortly. How are you feeling, Lyra?" The name hit me like a splash of ice water. "Lyra," I said, my voice a hoarse croak. "No, you don't understand. I'm Alara. My sister is Lyra." The nurse's smile didn't falter. It just became more practiced, more patient. "Of course," she said, in the tone one uses with a confused child. "We know. It's okay. You're safe here. We're going to help you." She checked my pulse, her touch gentle but firm, and left the room. Panic, pure and undiluted, began to set in. This was a mistake, a terrible, insane mistake. Dr. Evans arrived an hour later. He was a calm, authoritative man in his 50s, with a perfectly trimmed beard and eyes that held a deep, professional pity. "Lyra," he said, sitting in a chair beside my bed. "I'm Dr. Evans. We spoke briefly when you were admitted last night. Do you remember?" I shook my head, my mind a frantic scramble. "I am not Lyra," I insisted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "My name is Alara Vance. My sister, Lyra. She did something to me. She drugged me. You have to believe me." He listened, nodding slowly, his expression never changing. "I understand," he said. "Your sister, Alara, told us this might happen. She told us that your delusion has become very specific." He opened a file on his lap. "According to your sister," he continued, his voice a steady, rational drone, "you've been struggling for some time. A deep-seated jealousy, a feeling of being the less successful twin. It's not uncommon. But recently, it has escalated into a full-blown identity delusion. You've begun to believe you are her. You've tried to access her bank accounts. You've told her friends that she is the imposter. Your sister was heartbroken, but she knew she had to get you help before you hurt yourself or someone else. She admitted you here last night. She was very brave. The story was so complete, so perfectly twisted. It was a work of art, a diabolical masterpiece of lies. Lyra hadn't just switched our places. She had created a narrative so convincing that every protest I made, every plea for the truth, would only serve as further proof of my illness. I was in a cage made of words, and the more I rattled the bars, the more insane I would appear. While I was trapped in my waking nightmare, Lyra was stepping into my dream life. She cut her hair into the same chic, asymmetrical bob I had. She swapped her flashy, designer clothes for my more understated, artistic wardrobe. She went to my gallery. She stood in front of my employees, my artists, and, with a flawless imitation of my quieter, more thoughtful demeanor, she began to run my business. She met my fiancé, David, for dinner. He, of course, knew something was wrong with Lyra. Lyra, playing the part of me, put on a heart-wrenching performance. She told him about my sister's tragic breakdown, her voice breaking at all the right moments. "I had to do it, David," she said, tears welling in my eyes. "I had to get her help. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do." David, my kind, loving David, held her hand, comforted her, told her she was the strongest woman he had ever known. And then, Lyra, my venomous, brilliant sister, began her real work. She told the gallery manager that she was in a financial bind due to Lyra's expensive medical care, and that she needed to sell off a few of the gallery's most valuable paintings quickly and quietly. Days turned into a week. My life in the clinic was a monotonous hell of therapy sessions where my truths were treated as delusions, and quiet hours spent staring at the reinforced window. I was trapped, powerless, disbelieved by everyone. My own face, my own name, had been stolen from me. Despair was a heavy cloak, and I was beginning to suffocate under its weight. It was during a sleepless night, staring at the ceiling of my white room, that a memory came to me. It surfaced from the deep, a glimmer of light in the crushing darkness. My 16th birthday. My mother, Anya, a woman whose hands were as skilled with tiny, intricate gears as they were with a comforting touch, led Lyra and me into her workshop. The room smelled of sandalwood and metal polish. On her workbench, under a velvet cloth, were two objects. She pulled the cloth away to reveal two identical mantel clocks. They were masterpieces, crafted from dark cherry wood and polished brass. Their faces a beautiful dance of spinning gears and delicate hands. "These are for you," our mother had said, her eyes shining. "They are sister clocks. I made them as a matched set, their mechanisms perfectly in sync, a mirror of each other, just like you two." She turned one of the clocks towards me and the other towards Lyra. "But they are not just for telling time. Inside, each has a secret heart, a puzzle based on your own memories, your own story. Only its true owner, the one who holds those memories, can ever open it. It will always know who you are, even if the rest of the world gets confused." I remembered being fascinated, running my fingers over the intricate carvings. Lyra had been less impressed, more interested in the new car our father had bought her. The memory faded, leaving me back in the sterile silence of my room. But the despair was gone. The heavy cloak had been lifted, replaced by a tiny, fierce spark of hope. My mother had known. Somehow, she had known the true natures of her daughters, the steadfast and the volatile, and she had built a failsafe. She had created an ultimate proof of identity, a lock that could only be opened by the key of my own life. I finally had a path forward. My identity wasn't in a medical file or in the biased opinions of a doctor. It was locked away, safe, inside the intricate heart of a clock. My clock, the one currently sitting on the mantel in my apartment, in the life that had been stolen from me. The challenge was no longer just proving who I was. The challenge was getting to the one object on Earth that could do it for me. I got out of bed and walked to the darkened window. I looked at my reflection, a pale, haunted version of the face I knew so well. But the fear in my eyes was gone. It was replaced by something new, something hard and sharp and resolute. The game was on, and I was no longer the pawn. I was the player, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was going to win. The first rule of survival is adaptation. My initial strategy, frantic denial, righteous indignation, had failed spectacularly. It had only served to reinforce their narrative of me as the hysterical, delusional twin. Locked in that sterile white room, I realized that to fight a lie, so perfectly constructed, I couldn't use the truth as a sledgehammer. I had to use it as a scalpel, finding the one tiny, hidden artery to sever their deception. To do that, I first had to become the person they believed I was. I had to become the perfect patient. My transformation began the next morning. When the nurse came in with my breakfast, I greeted her with a subdued, fragile smile. "Good morning," I said, my voice quiet. I think I'm feeling a little clearer today. In my therapy session with Dr. Evans, I didn't argue. I didn't insist I was a Lara. I played the part of Lyra, the broken, repentant sister. I looked at my hands and spoke in a low, halting voice. "I know you're trying to help me," I said, paraphrasing. The very words he had used on me. I know my sister, Elara. She's just worried. She's always been the strong one, the successful one. It must be so hard for her to see me like this. I gave him back his own diagnosis, wrapped in a bow of tragic self-awareness. I saw the shift in his eyes. He was no longer dealing with a resistant, combative patient. He was now a brilliant doctor witnessing a breakthrough. For 2 weeks, I was a model of compliance. I attended group therapy sessions. Speaking of my jealousy and identity confusion, I took the medication they gave me without a fight, only to discreetly hide the pills under my tongue and dispose of them later. I was building a case for my own sanity by pretending to embrace my supposed insanity. With this performance of progress came privileges. First, it was access to the common room. Then, the library. I devoured every book they had, not for the words, but for the knowledge of my prison's layout. I observed the staff routines with the focus of a predator. I learned that the night shift was smaller, that the security guard at the West Wing entrance, a man named Arthur, was older and often dozed off in his chair after 2 a.m. I noted the delivery schedules, the laundry pickups, the blind spots in the security cameras. I was no longer a patient. I was a strategist, gathering reconnaissance for the most important escape of my life. Meanwhile, in my old life, my sister was making herself at home. She was a masterful actress. She adopted my quieter fashion sense. She mimicked my thoughtful way of speaking. She charmed my friends and the artists at my gallery. But a copy, no matter how perfect, will always have flaws. David, my fiancé, was adrift. He loved me, he loved Elara, but the woman he was living with felt off. A little too loud in her laughter, a little too eager for expensive dinners, a little too dismissive of the quiet, intimate rituals that had defined our relationship. He attributed it to the stress of dealing with her sick sister. But a seed of unease had been planted. My chance to water that seed came after my second week of good behavior. I was granted a supervised phone call to reconnect with your support system, Dr. Evans had said, smiling benevolently. I asked to speak to my sister, knowing Lyra would never answer a call from the clinic. As expected, the call went to voicemail. With a practiced sigh of disappointment, I turned to the nurse supervising me. Could I maybe just speak to my fiancé, David, for a minute, just to hear his voice? The nurse, seeing my compliance and fragile state, agreed. The call was put on speakerphone. David's familiar, warm voice filled the small office. Elara, is that you? Are you okay? He still thought he was talking to his fiancée. No, David, I said softly, injecting a tremor into my voice. It's Lyra. Elara is busy. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. Lyra, he said, his voice cautious. It's okay. You just focus on getting better. This was my moment. I had one shot. I'm trying, I said, letting a tear roll down my cheek for the nurse's benefit. I get so confused sometimes. My mind keeps going back to happy memories, you know? I keep thinking about that trip we all took to Florence. Remember, David, that little cafe with the bright blue awning near the old bridge, and that old man who tripped and spilled a whole crate of oranges all over the cobblestones. You. And Elara laughed so hard. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It was a silence so profound I could feel it. Yes, he finally said, his voice strained. I remember. Lyra, you just take care of yourself. We said our goodbyes and I hung up, my heart pounding. The nurse patted my shoulder. That was a very positive step, Lyra, she said. I just nodded. A vessel of perfect, tragic progress. Across town, David hung up the phone, a deep frown on his face. Florence, he thought. The blue awning, the oranges. He had never been to Florence with Lyra. He had gone to Florence with Alara 2 years ago, and he remembered that exact moment. The chaotic, beautiful mess of the oranges rolling across the piazza. It was one of his most cherished, specific memories with the woman he loved. How could Lyra know about it in such vivid detail? That evening, he confronted the woman he thought was me. I spoke to your sister today, he said, watching her carefully, as she poured two glasses of wine. Oh, Lyra said, feigning casual interest. How is the poor dear? She's confused, David said slowly. She mentioned that trip we all took to Florence. Lyra froze for a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic in her eyes before she recovered. Ah, Florence, she said, with a laugh that was a little too loud. That was a fun trip, wasn't it? All that pasta and wine. I can barely remember half of it. She had fallen directly into my trap. Her vague, generic answer was a stark contrast to the vivid, specific memory I had just recounted. For the first time, David looked at the woman in front of him, the woman who wore my face, and he felt a terrifying, chilling doubt. Who was she, really, back at the clinic? I knew I had to move fast. The seed of doubt would grow, but it might not be enough. I had to get to the clock. My escape was planned for a Thursday night, the night the main laundry bins were collected from the service basement. I had spent my library time studying the building's old blueprints, which were, ironically, framed as art in the main hallway. I had found my route. During my afternoon free period, I had managed to slip into a janitor's closet and steal a simple, gray uniform. That night, I didn't take my medication. I waited until 2 a.m. when the halls were at their quietest and the old guard, Arthur, was most likely asleep. My heart was a frantic drum as I slipped out of my room, dressed in the oversized janitor's uniform. I moved through the sleeping asylum like a ghost, every creak of my rubber-soled shoes sounding like a gunshot. I made my way to the laundry. Shoot! It was a disgusting, risky path, but it was the only one that wasn't covered by cameras. I held my breath and slid into the darkness. I tumbled out into a massive, empty laundry bin in the basement, the landing knocking the wind out of me. I was free from my floor, but not from the building. I crept through the labyrinthine basement, my mind racing, until I found the service elevator. As I rode it up to the ground floor, I felt a tremor of fear. What if I was wrong? What if the clock was just a clock? What if I escaped this prison only to find myself in a larger, more hopeless one? I pushed the thought away. I had to trust my mother. I had to trust my own memories. I emerged into a silent, deserted hallway near the main kitchen. The front entrance was out of the question. I headed for the west wing, towards the large conservatory at the back of the building. It was the least secure area, a place of glass and plants. As I approached the final corridor, I heard footsteps. I ducked into a small alcove, my body pressed against the cold wall, my breath held tight in my chest. It was a nurse, doing a final, unexpected round. She walked past my hiding place, her footsteps slow and steady. She was so close I could have reached out and touched her. She paused, and for one heart-stopping moment, I thought she had seen me. But then she yawned, shook her head, and continued down the hall. I waited until her footsteps faded completely before I moved again. The conservatory doors were locked, but one of the large glass panels near the ground was loose, a fact I knew from the clinic's own maintenance reports I had read in the library. I wrapped my hand in the thick fabric of my sleeve and pushed. The glass pane moved just enough for me to squeeze through, and then I was out. The night air was cool and sweet. On my face, a startling contrast to the sterile, recycled air of the clinic. I was free. I ran. I ran through the manicured lawns of my prison, a gray, anonymous figure in the dark. And I didn't stop until the city lights were a comforting glow in the distance. I was a fugitive with no money, no phone, no identity, but I had a destination. I spent the rest of the night navigating the sleeping city, using the skills of a ghost I never knew I possessed. I finally reached my own neighborhood as the sky was beginning to turn a soft, pre-dawn gray. My apartment building, my fortress, was now the enemy's lair. I couldn't go in the front, but I knew its secrets. I knew about the old, creaky fire escape that ran up the back of the building, right to my kitchen window. A window whose lock had been a little loose for years. A small chore I had never gotten around to fixing. Climbing the cold, wet metal rungs, my body aching, was the hardest physical thing I had ever done. The city sprawled beneath me, a beautiful, glittering carpet of lights. I finally reached my window. I pulled a small, thin piece of metal barrette from my own hair and worked it into the latch, just as I had seen in movies. After a minute of frantic, desperate jiggling, I heard a soft click. The window slid open. I slipped inside, into the silent, dark apartment. It was my home, but it smelled faintly of Lyra's expensive, cloying perfume. It was a violation. I stood there, a shadow in the darkness of my own living room, my eyes adjusting, and then I saw it. Across the room, a familiar, elegant silhouette against the pale light of the window. There, on the mantelpiece, stood the clock. My clock, the keeper of my past, and the key to my future. I had made it, but the most difficult part of my journey was just about to begin. The air in my apartment was cold and stale, tainted with the ghost of my sister's presence. I stood motionless in the center of the living room, my eyes fixed on the mantelpiece. The clock was there, just as I had left it, a silent, elegant sentinel guarding a truth only I could unlock. For a moment, a wave of surreal disorientation washed over me. I was a burglar in my own home, a fugitive hiding in the ruins of my own life. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I didn't know when Lyra would be back. She could be gone for hours, or she could walk through the door at any second. Time was a luxury I did not have. I moved across the room, my feet silent on the soft rug. I lifted the clock from the mantelpiece. It was heavier than I remembered, crafted from solid cherry wood, the brass components giving it a significant weight. I carried it to the large oak dining table and set it down gently under the soft glow of the overhead light. It was beautiful, a true masterpiece. My mother's genius was in every detail. Intricate carvings of our favorite childhood flowers, roses for love, lavender for devotion, violets for faithfulness adorned its base. The hands were delicate, shaped like willow leaves, but I knew its beauty was a disguise for its complexity. This was not a clock. It was a vault. My mother's words from that long-ago birthday echoed in my mind. A puzzle based on your own memories. It was a test that only the real Elara could pass. I took a deep, steadying breath and began. The first step had to be the most fundamental, time itself. I gently turned the hands of the clock. What time would be significant only to me? The time of my birth. I was born 7 minutes before Lyra, a small detail she always resented. I set the hands to 4:52 a.m. I felt a faint, almost imperceptible click deep within the mechanism. The first tumbler had fallen into place. Next, the flowers. They weren't just decoration, they were a keypad. I thought back to the garden of our childhood home, a place I had spent countless hours with my mother while Lyra was off with her friends. I remembered the order in which we had planted these exact flowers along the stone wall. First, the violets, at the far end, then the lavender, and finally, the roses closest to the house. I pressed the small, carved flowers at the base of the clock in that sequence. Violet, lavender, rose. I felt another, deeper thud from within the clock's housing. The second lock was disengaged. The final piece of the puzzle was the winding key. It was a beautiful, ornate brass key that fit into a small hole on the back of the clock. Winding it would be the final step, but how many turns? My mind raced through our shared history, searching for a number that was uniquely mine. And then I remembered. When I was 10, I had a terrible bout of pneumonia. I was bedridden for weeks, and my mother, to keep my spirits up, had read me The Secret Garden. She read it to me over the course of 14 nights. Lyra had hated the story, calling it boring. But for me, it was a magical, formative experience. 14, a number that meant nothing to her, but everything to me. I inserted the key and began to turn, my counting silent, precise. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 14. On the 14th turn, I didn't feel resistance. I felt a soft release, and then a section of the clock's base, a piece so seamlessly integrated I had never noticed it before, popped open with a quiet sigh. It was a hidden drawer. My hands were trembling as I pulled it open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded black velvet, was a small, sealed package wrapped in oilskin, and a letter. The letter was in my mother's hand, addressed to me. My dearest Alara, it began. If you are reading this, it means your sister has finally allowed her shadows to consume her light, and she has tried to extinguish yours in the process. I am so sorry. I always knew she had a darkness in her, a chaotic storm that I could never quite calm. And I always knew you had a strength in you, a quiet, resilient core that she could never understand. I built these clocks as a final safeguard, a last testament to the truth of who you are. The world can be easily fooled by a familiar face, but a lock built from memory, a key forged from love, will only ever open for its true owner. Inside this package is your proof. It is your voice when yours has been taken away. It is your identity when yours has been stolen. Use it not with vengeance, but with the strength and grace I always knew you possessed. Reclaim your life. It is, and has always been, yours. With all my love, your mother. Tears streamed down my face as I read the words. It was a letter from the grave, a final act of a mother's fierce, protective love. I carefully unwrapped the oilskin package. Inside were 3 items. The first was a legal affidavit, signed by my mother and her lawyer, attesting to the existence of a unique, irrefutable medical identifier for me, Alara Vance. The second was a faded medical envelope. I opened it. Inside was a small, dark X-ray. It was of a child's ankle, and clearly visible in the bone was a tiny surgical pin, the result of a bad break from falling out of a treehouse when I was 7. An incident Lyra had missed because she was away at a summer camp she had begged to attend. The third and final item was a thick, vellum document. It was the original, Hand-signed deed to my art gallery, a business my mother had helped me fund. At the bottom, next to her signature and mine, was a special clause she had insisted on. A clause I had thought was just her being eccentric. It stated that any transfer of ownership required a verified thumbprint match from me, Elara Vance, to be executed. A signature could be forged, a face could be imitated, but a fingerprint, like a memory, was unique. I had it. I had everything I needed. I carefully placed the documents back in the package and stood up, a wave of triumphant relief washing over me. And in that exact moment, I heard it. The sound of a key turning in the front door lock. My blood ran cold. It was Lyra. She was home. I had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The door swung open. Lyra walked in, shaking the rain from her umbrella. She saw me standing by the dining table, the open clock in front of me, and she froze. Her face, my face, went through a rapid series of expressions. Confusion, then disbelief, then a pure, unadulterated rage. "You," she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous snarl. "How did you get out? How did you get in here? This is my home." "Lyra," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I'm not the one who needs to explain why I'm here." She lunged at me then, her manicured nails like claws, trying to grab the package from my hands. "Whatever you think you have, it's not enough," she screamed. "Everyone thinks you're insane. I'll just call the clinic. They'll drag you back in a straitjacket." We struggled, a bizarre, nightmarish dance of two identical women, one fighting for her life, the other for her lies. And then the front door opened again. "Elara," a voice called out. "David." He walked into the living room and stopped dead, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the scene. Two Elaras, one in the simple, gray scrubs of a fugitive, the other in my expensive designer coat. He looked from my face to her face, his mind struggling to process the impossible sight. Lyra saw her chance. She immediately burst into tears, pointing a trembling finger at me. "David, thank God," she wailed. "She escaped. She's crazy," I told. "You?" she broke in. "She's trying to attack me. You have to call the police." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at David, my heart in my eyes, and I held out the package. "David," I said, my voice clear and steady, "please, just look. Look at what's inside." He hesitated, his gaze torn between the two of us, his face a mask of confusion and dawning suspicion. He remembered the phone call, the oranges in Florence. He took the package from my hand. Lyra screamed at him not to, but he ignored her. He opened it. He read our mother's letter. He looked at the X-ray. He saw the deed with the thumbprint clause. I watched as the puzzle pieces clicked into place behind his eyes, as the web of my sister's lies unraveled in his mind. He looked up from the documents, not at her, but at me, and in his eyes, I saw recognition. I saw belief. I saw my David again. "It was you," he whispered, his voice filled with awe and horror. "On the phone. It was you." "Yes," I said, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. The game was over. Lyra knew it. Her rage collapsed into a sniveling heap of self-pity. "I had to do it," she sobbed, sinking to the floor. "You don't know what it's like. The people I owed, the trouble I was in. You had everything. Elara, the perfect life. I just wanted a piece of it." The police were called. The full story came out. Lyra was arrested. Her crimes far more extensive than just what she had done to me. She was wanted for fraud, for embezzlement, her life of reckless charm finally catching up to her. A year has passed. The word rebuilding doesn't quite cover it. Reclaiming, perhaps. My gallery is thriving, more successful than ever. My ordeal has, strangely, given my own art a new depth, a new honesty. David and I are still together. The trust between us was deeply broken, not by his disbelief, but by the sheer violation of what had happened. We are healing, slowly, carefully, with honesty that we had perhaps taken for granted before. It is a quieter love now, but a stronger one. My mother's workshop, which had been locked up since her death, is now my sanctuary. I had both sister clocks brought here. They sit side by side on her old workbench. Lyra's clock is still locked. Its secret heart is still a mystery, its puzzle unsolved. Sometimes, I find myself trying to solve it, trying to map the memories that would open it, trying to understand the sister I both loved and lost. Maybe someday, I will. I have learned that our identity is not just in our face, the part the world can see and imitate. It is in our stories, our scars, our hidden memories. It is a complex, intricate mechanism, a puzzle box of its own, and its final, most secret compartment can only be opened by that truth.